In these cognition slides, we'll discuss attention, we'll talk about being in the workforce, we'll talk about mental health, and we'll talk a little bit about Alzheimer's. For attention, for this chapter, we're going to talk about selective attention and sustained attention. We've talked about them before, being able to choose which stimulus you pay attention to and block out other stimuli. That is going to be selective attention. You're selecting what you're going to pay attention to. For example, if you take an older person to a loud restaurant, you might be worried that they can't focus on your voice. You are thinking about selective attention in that case. Paying attention to different relevant matters in traffic, that's selective attention. The stoplights, what cars are coming this way and that way. That's all selective attention. Some people, as they age, become worse drivers, and a decline in selective attention is one of the reasons for that. Being able to keep your attention on something, that is sustained attention, to stay focused on a particular task. So you might have a grandparent that can knit for hours and hours and hours, or one of your grandparents that can look out the window and keep track of everyone that's going by. That is sustained attention. As you age, selective attention becomes more difficult to maintain. And one of the reasons for this is the prefrontal cortex that begins to shrink. And this will lead to attention issues. It'll also lead to some other issues. We've discussed the importance of the prefrontal cortex numerous times. They do have some research that different video games can help increase selective attention. One you've probably heard of is Luminosity, but that platform does have mixed results, though. So if you're interested in that, you should carefully look into that research, like if you're looking for an aging grandparent. Studies that have demonstrated the effectiveness of training on working memory in older adults, it shows that older adults they have plasticity. And so we talked about that way early on, the idea that, kids, their brains are malleable, that they are plastic, that they can be formed in a certain way. As an older adult, the same is still true. It's not as easy, but it is still possible. Exercise, cognitive training, and strategy training can all increase working memory in adults. So there's some other things you could look at. Related, fish oil has been shown to increase executive function in older females, but the research hasn't provided consistent evidence. So this is going to be similar to something like ginkgo biloba, the ginkgo biloba research. Sometimes in some studies it shows that it works, in other studies not so much. But it is at least looking into, if you wanted to look into it again for like an aging grandparent. Another thing related to this is increased distractibility. This is one of the reasons for a decline in working memory. So if you watch a show with an older person and they're moving around the entire time, they're getting up for water, they're playing with the dog, they're talking about something else, those are all signs of increased distractibility, that they can't stay focused on the show. Okay, switching gears to work in older ages. So, or if you're still in the labor force at 75, the reason for that is you probably did not save enough to retire. And so finances can keep you in the workforce until basically you die. So try to plan accordingly. In 2015, 32% of 65 to 69 were in the labor force. That's a huge number. A third of people in that age where you should be retiring, they're still having to work. This is when you're supposed to be cutting back, enjoying grandkids, enjoying the leisurely pursuits that we've talked about the last couple chapters. And a lot of people have to retire later than expected because of the finances. And this is going to get worse for various reasons. That being said, older adults who continue to work have better physical profiles than those who retire, which makes sense if you're out being active, for 40 hours a week or 30, whatever it's going to be. It's going to help you physically. So if you do retire, do make sure to stay physically active. When some retire, they basically die right then. And this is probably one of the reasons that they quit being active altogether. Mental health for older people is a point of concern. However, older people do not have a higher incidence of psychological disorders compared to younger people. They do have some issues that younger people don't have, like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Things like depression, though, those are not a normal part of aging. Those with depression at this age, it's usually related to things like we've talked about, chronic health issues, for example. With dementia, it is this is how the book describes it, a global term for neurological disorders in which primary symptoms involve deterioration of mental functioning. Basically, they lose the ability to take care of themselves. They don't recognize familiar people. They don't recognize their surroundings. 23% of women and 17% of men who are 85 or older have a risk for developing this. It's also marked by a deterioration of memory, reasoning, language, and eventually physical function. In my opinion, it's the worst. It's hard to watch people go through this, let alone experience it. So some of the things that factor into Alzheimer's disease, amyloid plaques that are listed here, tau, and oxidative stress, they all play a role in this disease. Some things that are associated with the prevention, like before, healthy diet, exercise, weight control. There is some good news, though. They are getting better at diagnosing Alzheimer's, and so they're working for drugs on it. So hopefully by the time you are that age, they will have a better understanding of how it works, and they'll have some better understanding of some good treatments for it. All right, that is it for 15 in cognition. On the next slides, we'll go into chapter 16, which is the social and emotional chapter for older adults.